policy was set up in the Virginia colony and then also later into South Carolina. It's called Meritorious Manumission. Meritorious means to earn. Manumission means to release. So a black could earn his release from slavery if he did one of four things, or a combination, elaboration, or sophistication of those four things. One, if he could prove to whites that he could see things through the eyes of a white person, and he'd prove it by one, saving a white person's life; two, saving a white person's property; three, inventing something or improving the profits that he get from picking cotton and corn or tobacco; or four, if he would squeal on and tell on any other black person who was trying to escape from slavery. That was called meritorious manumission. We still got blacks in America that's working hard and diligently to get meritorious manumission. They're working hard to make sure that they protect a white person's property. I don't care, and they protect it by any time you come out with an affirmative action program. I have the dubious honor of being the person that wrote that first affirmative action plan for the state of Florida in 1971 that went all over the country, a comprehensive plan. I didn't write the plan for minorities, poor folk, Asians, Hispanics, Arabs, midgets, humpbacks, lesbians. I wrote it for black folk. But immediately the whole frame of reference is the way you keep black folk down is always dilute and water something and make pretend it's for everybody. And that way anything for everybody is for nobody. And so they took that minority program, the affirmative action program, made it a minority program. And said, now I want the affirmative action program to die for that reason. In 1999, I go down to Texas, and a program was written for black folk. I look at the amount of money in state contracts in Texas that year, and white women got 78%. And nobody in our black leadership, in our black overclass, and the black civil rights movement ever said, "Hold a second, how are you going to put white women into a minority, into an affirmative action program set up for black folk when she was right along with the white man?" She co-owned, co-controlled, co-influenced, co-herited, and everything that the white slave owner had, she had it too. She sat in the same house, under the same table, slept in the same bed and raised his kids. How is she entitled to be competitive with black men or black people in the society? But our black leadership didn't say anything. So white women went into the affirmative action program and took it over and dominated it. That's why you go to check Coca-Cola about 3 years ago. Coca-Cola Company, almost 66% of all the money on the minority program went to white women. And in Texas, white women got 78%, and Hispanics got 21%, and blacks got 0.9%. Because again, we don't know how to play the game. We keep buying into these myths about people, about these very broad, ambiguous groupings. And all of that stuff started immediately after the Civil War.
Racism is a team sport.
Mm-hmm.
Either you play as a team or you lose by default.
Right.
We have no social cohesiveness in our race. We have no social cohesiveness. We keep trying to play as individuals because whites teach you and engineer you into believing that somehow that individualism is important. Individualism is not important in a race-based society. That if white folks didn't enslave black folks as individuals, enslaved them as a group.
You said that leadership, unlike it was before, we've given our leadership to politicians and different folks who don't even know what they don't even care about us. And somewhere in one of your questions you talk about leadership. What we've done. I'm trying to remember which one it was.
Yeah, well, that's the origination of leadership. See, the first time we ever had any significant black leaders was after they had an evangelical movement that moved through this country in about the late 1700s,
right.
And when the religious movement came across America, all of us black folk expressed an interest in going to church, and they would take whites let black folk go to church with them, but ride in the carriage or stay outside. And finally, so I said, we'll let you sit up in the balcony as long as you're separated from whites. And listen to a religious ceremony because we're going to use the scriptures from the Bible to enslave your Europeans in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so by 1818, they finally came out with things that it's okay for blacks to have religious indoctrination, mm-hmm. and they gave out a catechism which says these are the things that black persons must pledge to do. He has to be hardworking, and again follow those things of 1710. Work hard, respect white folk, and then look for pie in the sky. And so they say, but the only thing about it, we must choose new black leadership. We're going to let black ministers be the leaders, starting in 1818.
Mm-hmm.
And black ministers became the first leaders in America. They stayed pretty effective in that until after the Civil War. And at that point in time, they began to move a little. They allowed. They quasi-freeze black folk. When they quasi-freeze black and allowed some of them to vote, then we got new leadership that came in about 1870. And these blacks now, so the leadership moved from a minister, it moves to black leaders being elected to Congress. But as those blacks got elected to public office in the 1870s, they were put on a code of ethics that says, again, if you come to a position in the public sector, in a public job, whether you're elected or appointed, you cannot do certain things. Again, you cannot come to a public office and express any concern about black folk. 2, that you cannot be able to come in there and talk about groupism. Or 3, you cannot, again, try to hold white people accountable for the enslavement of your people for 360 years. That became a code of ethics for black folks starting in 1870s. It is still in existence where black folk are seeking meritorious manumission. That's why all these blacks sitting in public office right now will never do anything for black folk. There is no direct connection between putting a black person in a public office and black folk specifically getting benefits. How can a black person sit in a public office and do things specifically for Jews, for Arabs, for Asians, for Hispanics, for women, for midgets, for humpbacks, for transgenders, for people with hernias or hemorrhoids, but won't do anything for black folks? I did a survey back in 1960 where I looked at on black elected officials compared to the social economic discomfort conditions of black folk across America in terms of food stamps, welfare, imprisonment, dysfunctional schools, dysfunctional family, drug abuse, all these kind of things. I use the social indicators to equate the conditions of black folk, because at that time in 1960 you only had three black elected officials of any significance in the country. And so I said, I did that survey and showed that black folk were going into extremely bad conditions. Now I waited 30 years from 1960 to 1990, and I used the same indicators to see what are the conditions of black folks in 1990. It should be tremendously better, because the number of black elected officials have gone up over 9,000. 9,000. They're going from 3 to over 9,000. That's a 9,000% increase. I said if there's a 9,000% increase, then hell, that should be, black folks should be floating on air. I said, let me see what the conditions are. I looked at the conditions and ran the same indicators, and not only had black folk not progress, they've gone backwards. They're going backwards because they've still being injured by that code of ethics that was put in place in 1870. And that is that black folk in public office must not do anything for their own people. And that's why there's never been a connection between putting a black person in office and black folk getting benefits, except a few instances I talked about earlier. The Harold Washingtons, the Maynard Jacksons, the Adam Clayton Powell, the Joanne Watsons, and the Dorothy Tillmans. There are a couple more, but that's it. That's it. Most blacks go to public office, the first statement they're going to make is, I'm here to represent all the people. And that's a violation, that is a contradiction of the principle of politics. Politics is based on a very simple premise, Dorothy. It's based on the concept of quid pro quo, something for something. One hand washes the other. If I elect you to public office, you must represent me in a representative nation. This government is functioning on being representative of a certain constituents. So when you get elected to a public office, your first responsibility that you swear an oath to, saying, I hereby promise and swear to protect and serve those who put me in office. And black elected officials never accept that, even though they swear on the Bible that's what they're going to do.
The establishment, though it may reward us, in order to maintain its control, if necessary, it will kill us. The essential idea that motivates white supremacy is that of maintaining control and dominance. And this establishment that maintains control and dominance will at one time reward you, Negro bourgeoisie, and when necessary to maintain its control, will also kill you. And I'm saying that because there's some of us who think because we are receiving certain rewards from this system that these rewards will continue forever. But you have to recognize rewards are a mean of control as much as punishment. We talk about it in psychology as what? Positive reinforcement. Yeah. Bribing. Yeah. So you give positive reinforcement, good salaries and what have you, good house and so forth, and all of a sudden those people who were gate rebels in the 1960s become neoconservatives in the 1980s and say, you know, they got the good life, they bought the idea, they think that this is going to go on forever. Have not studied the manipulation through rewards. And they went to college and studied psychology. You know, and I've told you before how we are miseducated when we study psychology. We'll go right in there and study Skinnerian psychology and conditioning. And what have I told you before? We will not put ourselves in the place of the rat in the box. And we will not put ourselves in the place of the Pavlovian dog. We misidentify ourselves with the experimenter. But the actual condition of African people at this point is that of the Pavlovian dog and the Skinnerian rat, with others being at the controls and manipulating rewards and punishments and what we call negative reinforcements as a way of controlling our behavior. And when we talk about behavior in psychology, we not only talk about movement, but mental behavior as well, thinking in certain ways, seeing in certain ways, experiencing the world in certain ways. We include that too under behavior when we talk about behavior. And there are three fundamental ways, you see, of maintaining behavior in a conditioning situation. Rewards, and then what we call positive reinforcement. Then you have negative reinforcement, which isn't the same as punishment. It's a situation where you release a person from a painful situation on the condition that they behave in a particular way. So in a sense, you put them in a painful situation. You say, well, I'll let you out of this if you do this. Or if they're in a painful situation, you say, well, I'll remove this situation if you behave in this way. This is what we call negative reinforcement. You see, a release from a negative situation, which is a form of reward. So I will release you from the ghetto if you say, I am an American and I love it. There is no racism. I don't feel dominated. Individualism is the highest ideology in the world. Okay, we'll give you a little extra pennies and you can live in a nice house. Get yourself a VCR and look at movies. And then those who belong to the underclass, we just can't change them. They're in a painful situation. They look like they even like it there. So for those, we have to administer what? Punishment. You see. But what do all of these have in common? Social control. Control. You see, so those of us who are being rewarded by the American system doesn't mean that we are any more out of the control of Europeans than those of us who are in the prisons. The game is the same. Social control, and until you decide as a people to end the capacity of whites to control your lives, we will always be subservient to them. And if one day we have to recognize that it becomes necessary to annihilate African people in order that the European stays in social control, then they will annihilate us. I don't care what kind of degrees you got and what kind of money you're making. Well, and notice when I said earlier about this class I was in, as long as I teach them these Eurocentric concepts in the psychology class, the class is very comfortable. No problems, everybody's hooked in. As soon as I talk about how this applies to blackness, as soon as I move from the rat in the box and how that rat is black people, twisting and turning, total discomfort. When I told my class yesterday, I said, I'm going to do a lecture over here at Hunter tomorrow. What are you going to talk about? Third world economics? You know? And these are black students, you know, making a joke out of it. You know, and that was the implication here, you know. It's a way of saying we're uncomfortable when you talk about the third world. We think it's unimportant that you keep raising this issue in the class. You see, we think this is what you're talking about. When you relate this to us as unimportant, it makes us unhappy that you bring this issue up. Even though I told them at the end of the class, you're not going to be comfortable in here. You're going to be anxiety-ridden in here. Because if you're in a social science course and you're not upset, you are being lied to. The day you're sitting in social science courses, given the state that this world is in, and you're not upset and confronting yourself, you're being lied to. You should be most uncomfortable in these courses because they should force you to look and deal with reality, ladies and gentlemen. And so consequently then, what do we have? People who want to go to courses that make them do what? Feel good. That they're comfortable in. That they enjoy. You see. That they find not boring. You see. And often what they define as boring, courses that force them to think and force them to analyze and force them to slow down in their impulsive kind of thinking. Because you see, a lot of us are perseverative in our thinking, you know. Sometimes I'm talking in class and I mention one word and often some student goes with it, you know, all out of the context. Because we are often knee-jerked. We are prepared to respond to words and symbols and just run off with it and forget the whole logic and context of what is being discussed and dealt with, you see. So in this instance, then we have to deal with it. Now, wrap it up here then. The situation then is, we discussed in our class yesterday also conditioning. And it's very interesting because it's so simple. Because it says conditioning, the essence of operating conditioning is that behavior is controlled by its consequences. Very simple statement, but very, very powerful. So therefore, and the whole idea is, if a particular behavior brings satisfaction and brings, you know, rewards, it is that behavior is more likely to be repeated and to increase in frequency. If it, of course, is to bring dissatisfaction and pain and so forth, it is less likely to be. A very simple statement, but a lot of people overlook the simplicity of the statement because it's often these very simple concepts which are really the foundations. You see, the real things in the world cannot be complicated, ladies and gentlemen. I often tell people, the day that I see a religion using a book to get to its God, it's already alienated. Yeah. Yeah, but you got to learn how to read in order to know your God. You're already out of business. Note that the founders of your religion didn't have the Bible. They didn't read in the Bible. Jesus wasn't reading the Bible, and Peter and all those these things came 70 years and 100 years later. Why they even seem as supremely religious when you're now with the book is seen as less than they are? How can they be supremely related to God without a Bible, without a book, and you with the book is seen as disconnected? How can God relate to man in a very basic sort of way if he requires that they read first? Come on. The very essence and principles of the relationship of God must be gotten to much more simply than reading theology and getting degrees in theology, ladies and gentlemen. What a trick God must have played on us if he required that we read and get degrees in theology in order to be next to him. That's crazy. It must mean then that the very basic understanding of God and the very basic connection of God must be essentially simple and straightforward. But of course you need experts and authorities to do what? Complicated, so that then you have to come to them to get to Jesus. Let me pray for you, and then you'll feel better. Why can't I pray for myself? You know, the man of God. You mean I'm not of God? How did you come to be the man of God? I'm not the man of God. You see, but this is the part of the whole hierarchy. This is the part of the hell thing, you know, that the hierarchical things are going to send you to. Now, what are we talking about here then in terms of the conditioning situation here? The control of consequences. The essence of power, then, is the ability to control the consequences of other people's actions. Right? That's the essence of it. If I can determine what is going to happen to you as a result of the way you behave, then that is power. And if then your behavior is to a significant degree controlled by the consequences it brings, and if I can control the consequences it brings, then ultimately I control what? I control your behavior. And if I control your behavior over time, that it becomes habitual. And if it becomes habitual, it becomes a part of your character. It becomes a part of your personality. And so in essence, the ability to control the consequences of somebody else's behavior to a good degree ultimately means the ability to create their personality and to create those people as individuals. And when you see that rat in the Skinner box, that rat is being created. It's unlike any other rat. It's not the original rat. When you pick a rat out and put it in that box and control the conditions under which it lives, control when it's going to get fed, when it's going to get watered, when it's going to get food, and all the other kinds of things, that rat will learn various behaviors that reflect those conditions. We not only live under certain conditions, the conditions live in us. And when you look at this situation, as I tell and this is what I'm teaching my students, that makes them uncomfortable, you know. And I'm saying, look at your situation. The ghetto is a nigger box. What do we mean there? It is a set of conditions designed to create niggers out of Africans. And of course you will see who controls your water, who controls food, who controls the jobs, who controls information, and you'll see, and who manipulates all of these things in terms of behavior. And says, well, you have to write this way, you got to write this sentence this way, you got to talk this way, dress this way, walk this way, think this way, all of this if you are to get this job. And then when you get this job, you are to behave this way, so and so and so and so, if you are to get paid. And you can see then a creation of personality and behavior as a result of someone controlling consequences of behavior. So ultimately, you see, if you're going to create yourself, you're going to have to also get what? The ability to control the consequences of your own actions. And no matter how well educated you are, if that education does not lead to the end point of getting control of the consequences of our own behavior, it means ultimately then, no matter how well educated we are not going to be able to create ourselves as African people.